Okay, ready to get started. I think I'll fire up my virtual machine before I forget. So, virtual machine, INET 2005, and run the virtual machine. And as a piece of good news, I don't think there's much to say about the slides today. I think I just mostly run right into a demo. So let's see. Winter WEBD3101, today's February the 9th. Pretty sure there's nothing to say about the slides. Be a refreshing change from listening to me blather on before we get down to the nitty gritty. So, yep, just jumping right into a walkthrough. So what am I going to do today? Well, some of you may choose, notice the word choice in there, you have some choice on your next lab whether to use MySQL or SQLite, because we're going to be using Chinook database, which if you haven't realized, comes with many different flavors. That's one of the reasons the Chinook sample database is popular. They produce it for Postgres, they produce it for Oracle, they produce it for MySQL and SQLite, the two we're interested in. So there's many versions of Chinook. You can use the MySQL one and keep working like we've been working, or you may decide to go with SQLite. And if you decide to go SQLite, I'm going to show you today how to work with SQLite databases. So we'll go through a little bit about how to talk to SQLite. So without further ado, I'll just keep the walkthrough open so I can remind myself that I do everything. And we'll go to the virtual machine. And it's up and running. And I will log in with this password. Too many virtual machines, too many different passwords. Now, as soon as I get in here, I'm going to create a new project in RubyMine and point it at SQLite. Okay, so I'm going to do File, New Project. Keep in mind when you create a new Rails project, make sure you keep going under your repo. So it's going to go under Home, INET 2005, blah, 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 WEBD3101 instructor, so that's my own repo. And change the untitled to presumably the name of the project. I think I'll call this SQLite Demo. Yeah. SQLite Demo, I think is what I'll call mine. And of course, come down to the bottom where it says pre-configure for selected database and choose SQLite 3. And I think I was showing Jason the other day, if you're doing this in Cloud 9, when you do a Rails new, do a -D for the database and then type MySQL or SQLite 3. Okay, so if you want to pre-configure for a database at the command line, you do a -D when you do a Rails new. Okay, but in here it'll do it for me. So I'm picking SQLite 3. Keep jQuery fine for now. Everything else is fine. We'll say create. And current window, sure. Now really all that's doing is loading the appropriate gems to talk to SQLite, and it's also setting up my database YAML file. It'll already be pre-set up to talk to SQLite. Oh, maybe I'll click the little register VCS root message when it comes up. And as you can see, I clicked that quick enough. Now all my files are in red. And I'll just right click on my project and do a git add to add the whole project to Git. Okay, so it's installed. Notice, like I said, it installs the right gems. So in my gem file, we're now using SQLite 3. And if we go to the config database YAML file, you can see the adapters SQLite 3. That's essentially what it's doing. Loading the appropriate gems for that database and setting up your database YAML file to talk to it. And if you go into MySQL, it'll set it up for MySQL. Now, here's the key line right there. By default, the development run configuration is going to look for a database under the DB folder called Development SQLite 3. And in fact, remember with MySQL, we had to go create, if we were talking to a new database, we had to go create our database. With SQLite 3, it is clever enough to create me that database the first time I run. I do not actually have to create it myself. Let me prove to you it's not there. Let me go to my DB folder, and you can see I've only got seeds. But let's run this. So let's run it in development mode. And then pop over to another workspace, and I'm in a Firefox mood today. So run Firefox. Mostly I'm in a Firefox mood because I'm going to be talking to SQLite, and I like the Firefox SQLite plugin, so it'll make things easier. So localhost 3000. Should get the Ruby splash screen, and we do. Now remember, this did not happen with MySQL. Because in MySQL, you had to point to an existing database here. Either an existing one like Sequila and put in the root password and everything, or you had to create a new one like I showed you how to do. Either way, the database has to exist. But what's nice about SQLite is it's just going to go create you this database. Look over here under my DB folder. I now have it. So what's it doing under the covers? It's probably doing a Linux touch command to create the file itself, and then it's going and running a script on it to create a basic database structure. So as soon as I run my app, it's going to create that file. If we want to see what's in that file, I'll remind you of the highly useful plugin in Firefox, which is the SQLite Manager plugin. I think we played with that a bit back in our PHP days. And if you click on that, that'll open up, do I want to open my last database? No. I want to browse for my database. And I don't want this on the same workspace my Firefox is on. So I'm just going to right click on this and say move a workspace down. That'll put it on my third workspace. So then if I go to workspace 3, here's SQLite Manager. And I'll do a database connect. And I'm going to connect to, I got to go into my repo, Ruby, whatever I name my project. I think I called it SQLite Demo, DB. Oh, didn't work. Can't find my database. Well, this is a little flake of the SQLite Manager. It's only looking for SQLite extensions by default. And let me remind you of the fact we've got an SQLite 3 extension as opposed to an SQLite extension. So just go down to the bottom and change it to all files, and that'll find it, SQLite 3. It'll open it, no problem. And then I'll say open, and you can see I've got a database, but it's got no tables in it. Well, that shouldn't surprise us. We haven't run any migrations. We haven't done anything yet. Now, again, you want to verify you're talking to your database. We can come over here and we can do a schema load. But I think I'm pretty convinced that my app is running, it's talking to the database. We'll do a schema dump later after I've done a migration or two. Okay, but I think for now I'm pretty convinced I'm talking to the database. So your deadliest simple way of creating a CRUD app in Rails is what? Scaffold. And I have shown you half scaffolds, really, where I've created the models myself. Maybe we used RMRE to talk to the database, and then I create a scaffold controller. But you can do a scaffold, which will create you the model, create you the migration, create you the views, create you the controller, put a routes in your routes. It'll do everything. I've been doing scaffold controller, which is like half of a scaffold. But let me show you quickly and easily how fast we can build a CRUD app in Rails. This is why Rails is so popular, is how fast and easy things are. I'm going to go up to Tools. I'm going to run a Rails generator. And instead of scaffold controller, I'm just going to choose scaffold. Then what are my arguments? First is the model name. I guess we'll go with the example from the getting started, which was an article. So I'll say article, and I'll say it has a title, which is string, and a body, which is a text field, because it's longer than just a string for like a varchar or something. Okay, under options, I guess I could say don't generate a migration. Now I want the whole 9 yards. So I'm not going to turn that on. I do want a migration file, so don't hit that checkbox. I want it to create everything for me. This is a scaffold. So it's going to create me the model. Well, let's see what it does. Okay, instead of me telling you what it will do, let's see what it does. And I'll click OK. Oh, so what do I have there? It's kind of hard for you to see. Maybe if I copy out of there, go to my 4th desktop, fire up the text editor, gedit, paste it in. There, you can see what I typed in the generator. So I said generate a scaffold. I typed article, the name of the model, usually singular and uppercase. And then the fields we're going to have. We're going to have title as a string and body as a text. Okay, so that's what I typed. And click OK. And look at all the wonderful goodness this has done for me. If I bring up my output, wow, look at all that stuff it made. It made me a database migration. It made me a model called article RB. Gave me some tests. We'll talk about tests later in term. Ooh, look at that. Remember when I did a scaffold controller, I had to go in and create the route myself. I had to add resources to the routes file. I don't even have to do that. It did that for me. So it's automatically added a resource route to the routes file. Let me prove it to you. Let me pop over to the terminal here and do a Rails routes. Yep, I got all my article paths, get, post, put, everything we're used to for REST. What else did it do? It did create a scaffold controller. Okay, so part of a scaffold is to create the scaffold controller. Remember what I was doing before with you folks is I was creating models manually on top of existing databases, putting the resource in the routes file, then invoking a scaffold controller. Well, a scaffold does that, but it does the extra stuff as well. So it's created me models, created me migrations, put an entry in my routes, then created me a scaffold controller, which comes with views for index, show, edit, partial form for our edit and new. Gives me more unit tests, gives me a helper file where I could put any code that my controller needs. I could put it in that helper file. Gives me some coffee script. We'll see how to deal with that later. SCSS is coming very soon. That's probably what I'll be talking about next class. It's giving me that. It's giving me the whole 9 yards. All right, what's it giving me? Everything. So let's see some of it. Well, here's the model. Now, what are we going to get default for a table name, do you think? Articles. Remember, Rails by default will give us pluralized table names. You don't believe me? Go down and look at the migration. And the migration, articles is going to be the table name. All right? We can change that, but I would say on a new database created for Rails, don't change it. Let Rails go with its naming convention. Leave it happy. We change these when we have to talk to an existing database, okay, like Sequila that has single table names. If it's a new table, let Rails do its naming. That's my advice to you. All right, so it created me a migration, created me, if I go up under the app, controller, I get an articles controller. Look, it's got all the methods in it. Isn't that nice? And if I go down, I already showed you I had a migration. If you don't believe me about the views, here's the views. In an articles folder, look at all those beautiful views. Well, it created a whole whack of stuff, so maybe I right click on my project and do a git add before I forget to add everything to git. And let's run this and see what's happening right now. No, let's not run it. What do I got to do before I run it? Migrate, right. So I'll go, maybe I'll just do this from the terminal. And I'll do a little clear down here, and I'll do Rails db colon migrate. Drag that up a little bit so you can see what I type. Rails db migrate. Clear. Rails db colon migrate. Run it. Anytime you run a migration, make sure that something happened. Watch that little output report. It says it created the articles table. Actually, if I come over here to my SQLite manager and do a little refresh, yep, I got 4 tables now. It didn't just create me one. Well, some of these are kind of like internal tables to SQLite, and the schema migrations I've shown you before, that's Rails' way of tracking in the database which migrations have already run. So if I create a new migration, it's not going to run this one again. If you're curious, that version number, 2017 blah, 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 606, translates to, on the database, where's my database table? See, the name of that migration is 2017 blah, 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 606. So that number is stored in the database, so it knows it ran that migration already. And if we look at the articles table, look at the structure, what do we got? We got an ID, integer, not null, primary key. So that's probably an auto incrementing ID primary key. Yeah, look right there. It says auto increment right there. We got title, body, and it's got to create it at updated at date timestamp. All right. So let's just see if all this works. So I'm going to go to browse and search, and I'm going to add a new record into this articles table. Don't fill in the primary key. It'll generate automatically. We'll fill in a title of Mike's test article and a body of blah, de, blah, because I can't think of anything. And I'll click OK. Don't have to fill in anything else, just the title and the body. And OK. And here's a weird thing about the SQLite Manager. After you add a record, it's like asking you to add a second record now. And the only way to get out of the screen is to cancel it. And you're saying, well, no, I don't want to cancel it. I want to create. Well, if you kind of look in behind there, kind of hard to see, but to see that little blue line in behind, it did already create it. So just cancel, and there's my article. Why did I do that? Well, I think I told you before, I never run the app until I know the models are working. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to the Rails console and simply, drag this up a bit, simply do an art1 equals article find article ID 1. I always make sure my models are working at the console before I try running my app. And you can see it loaded Mike's test article. The body is blah de blah. I think we're convinced. So if it can do a find one, probably all my other methods are going to work, like article all, article new. I'm pretty convinced the model's working. So now let's try running our app. I already had it running, so I guess all I got to do over here is do a /articles. I thought I had it running. Yeah, I did. Okay, it just took a while. Okay, so Mike's test article shows up. Try our show method. Yep, back. Try edit. Mike's test article with an exclamation mark. Update. Yep, back. And I could try a new article. Second art, blah, 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 blah. Create an article. Back. Destroy that second one. Okay, I think you're convinced. CRUD is working. So that easy. in Rails to get an entire CRUD app built for you. Just scaffold it if it's on a new database. It'll create the models, it'll create the migration, it'll create the controller, it'll create the views, everything done for me. How wonderful. So scaffold is even one step better than a scaffold controller. If I'm talking to an existing database, I do what I already showed you, which is do an RMRE to create the models, or I create the models manually, then I do a scaffold controller on top of it, because I don't want the model and the migration all generated. But when I'm talking to a new database, ooh, scaffolds are nice. Scaffolds are wonderful. So, and remember I showed you before, yeah, you might say, well, yeah, but your table looks ugly. It doesn't have any borders on it. Well, we can always go change these default views they give us. So I can go into my index for articles, and I could also output the ID if I wanted. So I could come over here, put a new header, say output the ID, and I could come down here and copy in a new TD and output the article ID. And I could, we should do this in CSS, but I can quickly throw a border equals 1 on here and come back, reload. And now it shows me the article ID and I got a nice table. So we can tweak these. You say you don't like the default views they're creating, well, we can go change them. So that's a scaffold. Very, very nice. Up quick and easy. Get the whole database CRUD app working for us. Wonderful, wonderful stuff. So what else can I do? Maybe I'll pop back to the slides and see if I do everything I said I was going to do. Well, we created an SQLite project. I guess I didn't show you rolling back a migration. That's kind of interesting. Or checking migration status. So I should show you that. So you can always check, let me exit the console here. You can always check the status of your last migration by doing Rails DB migrate status. And you can see the last migration that ran was a create articles migration, and it worked successfully. There were no problems with it. Now, if you want, I screwed up my database and you don't like your last migration, we can roll it back. So how do we roll back our migration? Well, let me clear this. I can do Rails DB migrate rollback. Oh, no, I don't think I need migrate in there. DB rollback. Sometimes get these confused. It's migrate status, but for rollback, maybe I just do a DB rollback. There we go. And it said, what does it do? It dropped the articles table. Why? Because that was the last migration. So basically rollback undoes your last migration. So if I come back over here and do a refresh, my articles table is gone. And if I go into my schema migration, whoa, look at that, no migrations. Okay, rollback removes your last migration. And I could run another rollback, and that would remove the second oldest migration, youngest migration, I guess. So you can always roll back the last one you did with a rollback. The other thing we can do, so maybe I run my migration again. So do a little clear here. And just run a DB migrate to run my migration again. And DB migrate status, if you want to see how it worked. And there, created articles, so it should be back. Do a little reload. And the articles table is back. Maybe I'll show you, we don't always have to do things in migration, so I could be over here and I could create a table. So what if I create a table here? So I'll say table, create table, and what do we call this? I don't know, we'll call it test table, because I can't think of anything better. Or maybe, oh, no, I should keep the same naming convention. What would it be? It'd be lowercase, so tests, I guess. And it could have a column name of ID, data type of integer, primary key, auto increment. And we could have test name, I guess, as a varchar. And allow nulls, no, I'll turn that off. And we could have test description, which is a text, and I'll allow that to be null. You don't have to put the description in. Anyway, I'm just creating a second table. And then we'll click OK. Say yes to create the table. Now I've got a test table. And again, if you want to load the structure of your database into your app, we can do this, a little clear. And I can do Rails DB schema dump. And that'll take my schema from my database and load it into a schema file. I've shown you how to do this before. And now if I go down and look, I should have a schema file in my database. There it is. It's in red. Maybe I'll right click it and add it to Git. And that should have my schema in it. Articles and tests. Okay. Now let's pretend we don't want the test table anymore. So maybe I pull that out of here, or Control/ to comment it. And now let's write our schema to the database. How do you do that? You do a Rails DB schema load. And you can see that only created an articles table. So if I pop back, do a refresh, one would expect, refresh. My test table's still there. Maybe sometimes the refresh doesn't work. I'll close the database and reopen it. Let's see if that works. And connect all files, open it again. Oh no, test's still there. Didn't drop the table. I think I'd have to drop the table before I did the schema load, maybe? Yeah, it adds the tables that are missing. It won't necessarily remove it. Let me Google that. There might be a switch to it. I wanted to recreate the database. So Rails schema load clear DB or something. Oh, maybe I got to do a DB reset first. Maybe that's what they're telling me to do. Let's see. Clears the database. Oh, okay. Well, let's try that. DB reset. Maybe that's what I'm forgetting. So if I do a clear and do a Rails DB reset, let's see what that does. Ah, yeah. So reset emptied out the tables because it's not in the schema. Okay, so I think Laura's on the right track. If you do a schema load, it'll load new things in your schema, but won't necessarily empty out the database. So a schema reset or a DB reset will load the schema up into the database. So anyway, these are some things we can do in Rails with the database. Was there anything else I wanted to do there? We did that. We dropped and recreated it. We did the schema load and the dump. Yeah, I think we're good. So again, you could create a new migration in here, and we could just migrate the new migration. And then if you didn't like that, you could roll it back. You could do a reset and set the whole database back to its initial state. So anyway, there's a few ways we can interact with the database. What I want to show you next is how to talk to the Chinook database. So if we go, let's go over here to Firefox. Let's go find Chinook. And if you just Google Chinook, you're probably going to get a lot of Wikipedia pages telling you about warm western winds coming off the mountains and all that kind of stuff. So or helicopters, I guess, Chinook helicopters. So anyway, do Chinook DB. And that'll take you to the Chinook database home. So Chinook DB, first hit should be Chinook database home. And I just want to show you the difference. If you go to the downloads page up at the top, you could download this file, but it's probably got a bunch of stuff you don't need. It's got all the different versions of Chinook for all the different databases. I say you don't need that if you're going to use the SQLite one. So you could scroll down and pick your specific one. You can see, I did not lie when I said Chinook comes on almost every database platform, or relational database platform. DB2 is here, Oracle is here, Postgres is here, SQL Server, Microsoft SQL Server is here, and SQLite is here. And all of those are in their big complete version zip, all right? But I'm going to suggest to you to come down and grab the SQLite one. Now remember, don't have to. I said on your next lab you can use MySQL if you want. But SQLite's quick and easy. So I'll show you how to get that set up if you want to go this route. So I'm going to click on SQLite. And I will save the file. And that has downloaded it. Now, I'm going to come over here to Workspace 4. Close this without saving. I don't know if you ever noticed, but on the PHP virtual machine from last semester, I'm just of the habit, I don't like extracting things in my downloads folder. So I always copy it out of here, and I always put everything in an installations folder before I extract it. I don't know, old habits. I guess I was tired of having things auto-cleared out of my downloads folder, so I prefer to keep them somewhere else. And I will extract that. Open with Archive Manager. And extract. Extract. Quit. Okay, well, that extracted a bunch of stuff. Which one do we want? We want this file right here. Don't get the SQL file. That's a SQL script you would have to run on your database. That's a little annoying. How about we get the database itself? So get the SQLite. And then you're going to say, why are you choosing the auto increment ones? Well, because generally we like auto incrementing primary keys. Okay, that's a good thing if you're adding new records. So why not grab the auto increment ones? Even if you go with MySQL, I'll recommend you run the MySQL auto increment SQLite Chinook. Chinook. My auto increment MySQL Chinook. So I'm going to copy that file. I guess this isn't going to work until I create a project. So I'll come back to Workspace 1 and I will say File, New Project. Oh, should stop the server first, shouldn't I? Run, stop the server. And maybe commit all this to GitHub before we forget, if you want to keep this one around. So git, commit directory, and I'll call it basic SQLite CRUD demo via scaffolds. Via scaffold, sure. And I'll commit and push. And push. And then I will do a file, new project, new Rails application. We'll call this Chinook demo. Although if you want to do SQLite for your lab, call it lab 4 or something. I'll call mine Chinook demo. And SQLite as my pre-configured database is good. jQuery, yeah, all that's good. And I'll say create. And open in current window, sure. And I'll add the VCS root. And I'll go over and I'll right click on my project and do a git add. All right, so if we open up the database YAML, you can see what it's looking for by default. I got to rename that, right? I got to copy my file into the right folder, and then I got to rename this. So I'm going to go back to workspace 4, copy this file, Chinook SQLite auto increment PKs SQLite, and I will put it in home code. I got to go find my repo. The name of my project is Chinook Demo DB, and paste it in that folder. So the DB subfolder of your project. And hey, I don't like that name. That's too long. So I'll just say chinook.sqlite. I know it's the PKs one, automatic auto increment PKs. So maybe I'll rename it. That'll be quick. And then over here, uh-oh. Every once in a while, RubyMine will freeze up on me when I pop over to another screen and come back to it. I think it has happened. I cannot go to another tab. I can minimize it, but if I expand it, it's still frozen. If I go to another workspace and then come back, it's still frozen. Okay, I think I got to kill RubyMine. If you haven't seen me do this before, this is useful Linux reminders. So what you do is you go to a terminal, and the command is ps-ef to show all processes on the system. And we pipe it through grep, and grep mine for RubyMine. And there is the RubyMine process, 4468. Or is it this one, 4520? One of those two. I think I'll kill both of them. So I'll do a kill -9 on 4468 and up arrow and a kill -9 on 4520. And if I pop over to workstation 1, RubyMine's gone. Okay, very common to have to do that in Linux, to go find a process ID and kill it. Anybody remember what a kill -9 does? It's the highest level of kill. I don't remember what a kill -9 does. I just know if kill doesn't work, kill -9 does work. It's boss kill for you gamers. All right? It's the highest level of kill we have. It's our super attack. So it means a process, you must go away. I don't care what you think you're doing. You must die. Whereas a kill may not work. So I usually, if I'm really serious about making something disappear, I usually jump right to the kill -9. So file, open project, and I got to open Chinook in the current window. I don't know. I don't know why RubyMine every once in a while gives up the ghost. It seems to happen a fair bit when I'm swapping between workspaces on Linux. But I haven't really narrowed it down to one particular problem, so I can avoid it. So anyway, what do I have to do? I have to rename this development database to Chinook. Was it a capital C? Does anybody remember? Case sensitive in Unix. Got to get used to it, so I have to be right. And I think, actually, now that I think of it, I don't think it was SQLite 3. It was just SQLite? Okay, so I got to change that to SQLite. And we'll just change it for development. Now, again, oh, do you want it to be an SQLite 3? No, I'm okay with SQLite. No, because I renamed it when I copied it. Because I said I didn't like that great big long name. Yeah, just when I pasted in to the DB folder, I just right-clicked on it and did a rename, and I just trimmed out all that other stuff and just called it Chinook. I think that's good. You can rename it inside of RubyMine too. So I grabbed the auto increment. If you want to see the file I grabbed, I'll go back to my installs folder. I grabbed auto increment PKs SQLite. So I copied that file over here into my DB subfolder, and I just simplified the name when I copied it over. I just called it SQL, Chinook SQLite. Feel free, if you'd rather have the full name, you could drag the whole file in there. You're just probably gonna have to right click on this and do like a rename and then a control C or something, because I don't know about you, but I could never type all that case sensitive in a database YAML file and not screw it up. All right, so I would get something wrong in that file name. So part of me simplifying the file was so I'd make it a little more idiot proof for me to type in. So I'm saying DB Chinook. Now, we have two choices at this point. We can run a certain gem, do we remember, to give us all the models on an existing database, RMRE. But remember, it's going to give you every bloody model for every bloody table. May not want that. So I might just go create one model on my own. It's entirely your choice. Some people like RMRE and they delete the models that they don't need and it figures out all your relations for you. Fine. Well, what would I recommend? Well, you do have to do a join. You have to link your customers to invoices. So if you did RMRE, then you could get all those models for customers and invoices and the relationship, and then just delete the other models you didn't want. I'd probably recommend RMRE. I think for today's demo, I'll just create my own, just to remind you how quick and easy it is to create your own model. But and renaming the primary key might be a useful reminder for you. But yeah, I'd probably use RMRE. Remember, you can always delete the models you don't think you're going to use, and it'll generate everything for you. So yeah, I got to create a model to be able to talk to the database. So I am, maybe the first thing I'll do, I like to do this. We said the other day it's not necessary, but I like to make sure I'm talking to the database. So I will usually do like a schema load first, a schema dump, just to make sure I can load a schema file from the database. Is it talking to it? So I'll do Rails DB schema dump. And remember, that reads the database and generates me a schema file. Don't have to do this. It's just kind of useful to make sure you're talking to the database, and to give you a schema file that you can kind of save so people can go see what the schema is in code. They don't have to pop over to the database. So if I look at my schema, there it is. It's loaded in everything from Chinook. If you've forgotten about Chinook, tracks, artists, it's a music table. Oh, guess I should right click on my project and do a git add. And it's added my files. Okay, so I think I'm happy with that. Maybe I'll pop over here, close this database, and connect to Chinook, just to remind you what it looks like. So this should be Chinook demo DB and Chinook SQLite, and open it. And I think this is the table I'm going to try to talk to. It's nice and simple, artist table. It's just got an artist ID and a name. And it's got AC/DC and all these old, some classical groups as well. Okay, so that's the table I'm going to try to talk to. But remember, Chinook is a music table, so it's albums and artists and tracks, but it's also got customers and invoices, which you're going to do on the assignment. So yeah, it's talking to the schema. I think I'm happy with that. Let's see if we can get a model working. So I'm going to do tools, run Rails generator, and I'll say model. And it's going to be artist with a capital A. And I don't need to specify the field names because we should be able to figure it out from the database. And I'll just say artist. And options, don't generate a migration file. Ooh, I almost forgot that. Yeah, we're talking to an existing database, so migration files could be dangerous. Rewrite our tables or screw things up. Don't generally need a migration file talking to an existing database. I'll click OK. And let's see if this is working. I do not run the app. I do not generate any views at this point. I'm going to go see from the Rails console if it's working. So tools, run Rails console, And let's say art1 equals artist dot find 1. Wah, 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 wah. Did not work. Could not find the table artist. This should not surprise you. We're talking to an existing database. Rails assumes plural table names. And oh yeah, Chinook does not give you plural table names. So no problem. Just come over into your model. Remember the self.table name equals artist. I think it's capitalized too, isn't it? Chinook's got a really strange naming convention. Yeah, they use capital table names, which is rare. Okay, so it's capital A and it's singular is our table name. Also, I would recommend doing this. It'll probably work without it, but you might want to do a self.primary key equals, because it's not ID, right? It expects the primary keys to be ID, and here it's artist ID. So that would be artist ID. Something later on might not work well for you if you don't have the primary key specified correctly. Again, RMRE will figure all this out for you. Pretty sure it does. Pretty sure it does. Yep. No, your Chinook, because it's a file-based database, the credentials really come from your user's rights to the file. So it's basically based on the Unix file permissions on the SQLite file itself. So I think it'll work. If you're having trouble with it, call me over. I think I've done it before, RMRE on SQLite databases. Okay, maybe I think you may have noticed before the console doesn't pick up changes to the models on the fly. So maybe do a little restart over in your console window, rerun the Rails console, and now just up arrow and run our line again. And there it is. It found AC/DC. So just make sure you get the table name in there. We're having singular table names, so it won't be happy. Now, let's try this. Tools, run Rails generator, and let's run a scaffold controller. You're going to say, wait, you just told us scaffold was better. Yeah, but I already created the model. So create a scaffold controller based on artist. And what are we going to have? Where's my database? For fields. Artist ID is the primary key. Mostly just name as a string, I guess. Because we're not going to edit the ID. That's auto-generated, right? That's the primary key. So maybe I come back here and I just say name colon as a string. So a scaffold controller on the artist table with name as a string. And click OK. Now remember, scaffold controller does everything for us except models, migrations, and the routes. So I don't need a migration. I already created the model, but I got to go do the routes. So I got to go to my config, routes, and add resources, colon, artists. And if you don't know if that works, remember your Rails routes command. And basically, yeah, I got all my routes in there. Get on artist, get on an artist ID. So I think this will work now. Let's run it. In development mode. Pop over to here, and I guess I hit localhost 3000. See if I hit the splash screen. I do. And then localhost 3000/artists. And hey, there they all are. Aerosmith and everybody. And I guess I can prove to you full CRUD's going to work. Let's see if it does. Let's go down to the bottom and create a new artist, the Mike Crocker Trio, and we'll create them. We'll click back, scroll down to the bottom, created it, edit them. I already followed one person for artistic differences already, so it's the Mike Crocker Duo. And my partner better be careful, it'll be a solo act. And then we'll click down, it's Mike Crocker Duo, edit works, and well, I'm just disbanding. So now it's gone. I think I've convinced you that CRUD is working. Okay, so remember the difference between a scaffold and a scaffold controller. Scaffold's the whole 9 yards. Creates your models and your migrations and adds an entry to your routing table. Scaffold controller is, hey, I've already created the model, I got it working, and I just want the controller and all the views on top of it. Okay, so anyway, that's pretty cool. That quick and easy to get these CRUD apps up and running in Rails, even on an SQLite database, as opposed to MySQL, which we're a little more familiar with. Okay, so if I go back, I think I've blathered on long enough, and I think I told you everything I was going to do. So talking to an existing Chinook database and getting CRUD working on a single table. You're going to be doing CRUD on the customers table and linking in invoices. So speaking to Chris's point, yeah, maybe RMRE is the way to go because it'll figure out the relationship for you between the tables. And you can just delete the models for the tables you're not talking to if you want. Okay, so maybe before we finish, I'll just go over the lab doc so we're all on the same page. So did I have it last day? Yeah, there it is, lab 4. This is not due until, I know everything's been due on a Monday before, but this is not due to next Thursday. Why? Because I haven't talked about this yet. How to do a nice layout in SAS and SS. I'll be talking about that on Monday. So because I haven't done that yet, I can't make the lab due on Monday. That wouldn't be fair. So the lab's going to be due on Thursday. Right. So let me talk about that. So blah, 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 blah. What am I saying here? We will be building another CRUD app as before, but now it's on the Chinook database on the customers table. We want this as a RESTful Rail. Well, everything we do in Rails is RESTful, so that's just happening. We would like these operations to be password protected, so we're going to still use the devise gem to get authentication on top of it. Now, all that sounds just like Lab 3. What are the differences? Well, the differences are we want to have a nice layout using SAS and SCSS, which I'll talk about on Monday. We'll have paging. Well, I guess paging isn't new because we had paging before, so you probably want the pagination gem or use a nice data table to do that, to do your paging. You'll have icons and buttons in each table so we can show invoices. So the differences here are we're going to have a second table linked in, and you're going to have some nice buttons in the table, table icons. When you click the Show Invoices button, we'll see all invoices for that customer in a nice display of some sort. Now, here's the one Laura was talking about. Here's probably the trickiest thing in this lab. We want, well, let me go back to the database here and show you what I mean. If I come over here and look at Chinook, Chinook already has an employee table, correct? Here it is. And we've got 9 employees, employee ID 1 to 8. Andrew Adams, Nancy Edwards, and so on. And they have email addresses. What we really would like is we would like people to log in as these existing employees. All right, so for that to work, you've got 2 choices. You can figure out how to add the devise fields to an existing table and add them to employee, or, and I'm suggesting this is easier based on the students' experience last year, you could create a logins table that has a one-to-one relationship with the employees table. Therefore, every employee has a login, and it's the login table that you put devise on top of, or users, whatever you want to call it. And you have a one-to-one with employees. So an employee has a login user. Why do you care? Well, we need a chain that when a customer gets created by somebody who's logged in, I want that employee ID of whoever's logged in to go in this field here. It's called support rep ID. So whoever is logged in and creates a new customer, their employee ID should go in the support rep ID. Now, that sounds hard. Once you have your models set up, it's easy because we just say login user dot employee dot employee ID. So even if you go the two table route and you don't add devise to the employee table and you create a second table, it's no problem. So you've got a login table that's got the logins. It's got a one-to-one relationship back with the employees table. And then you just figure out who the login employee is and who that employee's ID is and put it in the support rep ID. I will say it is the most challenging thing on the lab. I would probably save it for last. But if you want my advice, it's easier to create a new table for devise, give it a one-to-one relationship with the employee table, and that's not a hack. Very often on a system, we have one table for our users, we have another table for their logins. Just because we don't want all the login information in the users table or the employees table. So I'm okay with that. And I think it's easier. So create a login table or a users table and just link it to employees. And then when they log in, you got to figure out what employee ID it was and put them in the support rep ID. By far the trickiest thing on this lab, for sure. But I would do it last after I get everything else working. And really, what is it worth? It's probably 2 points out of 10 on a lab that's worth, I don't know if it's 10 points on the term or not. I think it is, yeah. So it'd be 2 points on term for the support rep ID. So act accordingly if it's giving you a lot of difficulty. All right. So that's what we're going to be doing on lab 4, and you've got another week to do that. It is not due on Monday because I haven't talked about SCSS yet. But you could start doing it. Get CRUD working on the customers table. And then you can figure out how to get a second table in there and make things look nice. Okay? And I think I said right there, I said, I don't care if it's MySQL or the SQLite version of Chinook. It's your choice. Might want to do SQLite because I just showed you how to set that up. If you do MySQL, you'll have to create a new database and then run their Chinook MySQL script inside of it to generate all your tables. All right? It's not that hard, but I already showed you how to set SQLite up, so it's up to you. Okay, I think I blathered on way too long. Any questions about any of that stuff? All right, well, let me see if I can figure it out up here on a new project. So let's try it. So I will do File, New Project. And I'll call it Chinook 2. Or Chinook Demo 2. And SQLite, and I'll set that up. Current window. I'll add a VCS root for it. I will pop over here, add my whole thing to source control. I will need to copy the database in again. Over, yes, add it all to get. And over here, close that window, copy this again. And I'm putting it in home code, Ruby, Chinook Demo 2, DB, paste it in here. Going to rename it to Chinook again just to simplify things. Okay. Come over here to my database YAML. Chinook SQLite. Maybe run my schema dump to see if I'm talking to it. So I'll do Rails db schema dump. And yep, I am talking to it. Add those files to Git. And now I'd want the RMRE gem. So blah, 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 workspace 2. RMRE Rails. Where's the GitHub page? Bosco. There it is, Bosco. And do a gem install RMRE. And then what's he saying? Now you're right. He gives the example of MySQL. Configuration file. Now it does say down here at the bottom, under his to-do list, is foreign key support for other databases. So we may not get the foreign keys in SQLite, but it should work with SQLite. So we just got to figure out our SQLite string that we got to use. So does he have any readmes over here with further information? Let's see the readme doc. No, that's just this again. Well, I think I'll have to Google it. RMRE SQLite connection string. Might be just RMRE in the path to the file. No, that's just a data source string. Well. Not very helpful in the readmes. Let me paste this in. Oh, no, not that. Help. That's what I want. Let's see what the help's telling me. RMRE dash help. Database name. Dash A. Adapter to use. Dash D. So maybe my adapter would be the same as the one in the YAML file. So SQLite 3 dash D, and maybe I'll just try that path there. Let's see if that works. Go away, message. Said it generated some models. Did it actually do anything? Oh, maybe I got to do the output folder. Sorry. Dash O, is it? Dash O, and then the path where the models will be created. Right. So this would be app /models, I think. Let's look up here. App, yep. Models, yep. Let's try that. Ah, there we go. Now, how are they going to look? I think as we're seeing from their site, there's going to be a little bit of foreign key problems here, maybe. But you can see it's set up all your table names and your primary keys for you. You can't really complain about that. It's done all that. I guess it is not clever enough on SQLite to set up your relationships. So it's not the end of the world. You just got to go do your has many belongs to yourself. So how did I do that? Just let me clear this and I'll show you my command again. Oh, okay. I changed DB Chinook. Yeah. So I did the same thing I did with the other project. I copied Chinook into my DB folder and then renamed it to just Chinook instead of that whole auto increment long lousy file name. It didn't take over the foreign keys in the relationships. And it seems like that's a known issue. If you come back here to RMRE and go to the bottom of their page, it's on their to-do list. You can complain to Bosco that he hasn't finished it yet, that they didn't get the foreign key support. So unfortunately, RMRE is with, maybe that's your decider to go with MySQL. Now, to go with MySQL, you're going to have to, as I said, create a new database and then run the MySQL Chinook script inside that database. They're not actually going to give you a MySQL database file. You got to run the script. So you just got to create a new database and run it. You can do that in PHP myadmin, should work. So, but I mean, it's not the end of the world here. It created all your table names and got all your primary keys. You just have to do all the belongs to and has manys. And you only have one relationship to do, which is between customer and invoice. We don't really care about all these other tables. At least RMRE did a little bit for you, just not as much as MySQL. And I guess I'll do a right click into a get add to add all those models in. So for anyone who's curious, I'll just copy that and I can open it in a bigger font over here. Run it in gedit. Where's my gedit? Accessories? Accessories gedit. That was my command. I did RMRE-A SQLite 3. That's going to be the same adapters in the database YAML. I did -D, DB Chinook, whatever the path is, relative path to your database. And then I did -O to write the models to the app models directly. I don't know where the heck it's writing to if you don't put the -O in, because it seemed to run once. I don't know. It must be a temp folder or something. It's putting the models to. Okay, so that's how I got it to work, SQLite on RMRE, and unfortunately it doesn't figure out your database relationships. Not clever enough to pick out the foreign keys in SQLite 3, I guess. Okay, so I will stop the recording and the session.